This is video 2 on this Ford 2018 Mustang GT, the one that had the leaky condenser at the O-ring fittings because the machining off the aftermarket condenser was not correct. Anyway, remember in the previous video I explained that it had fewer cooling tube passages and fewer fins per inch. Well, they got the OEM, and as you can see with the OEM, it came with the air flap that directs the air so the air flows better over the condenser. And the most important thing, I've said this before and you got to keep this in mind, your bottom few rows of the condenser are your most important rows of your condenser, because this is where the subcooling happens right here. This is where the majority of the liquid is, and it's these bottom 4, 5, or 6 rows, depending on the manufacturer and the make of the condenser, where the subcooling action happens. So if you bypass the air and allow the air to go around, or in this case too, if like body shops who leave off the plastic shields under here and they don't put these back, it actually rolls hot engine heat back in front, because this is a negative pressure. You have a positive pressure in the engine compartment. When you're in stop and go traffic, you roll around 200-degree heat back up and around in front of your condenser. And worst of all, you roll that, say 140 or even 200-degree heat in front of the subcooling fins at the very bottom. And so you're actually superheating, adding heat to the last few bottom rows of extremely hot air, decreasing your performance and actually decreasing your gas mileage too, because your head pressure goes up on your compressor, making more torque and strain, needing more gas to keep the engine at its set idle speed, because now you're floating up there at 300, near 400 psi when you're in hot desert climates, rolling back superheated heat over your subcooling part. People don't think about that, how important that is. But this is what happens when you buy cheap aftermarket condensers that are not up to the standards of the OEM, even though they have papers, documentation that they meet and exceed OEM specifications, and they might have from a big fancy company who sells them saying, oh yeah, these are OEM like products for your economy parts that the insurance company wants. So that's the update on this. I'm performing the leak check right now, and we are good to go. I have dry nitrogen pumped inside. It's been 15 minutes. It's been rock solid. I used my leak detector and went around above and below the gaskets. It's rock solid. This is YF. You have a very expensive refrigerant at $150 a pound, so you do not want to have any leaks. And now I could go through the vacuum procedure and charge this vehicle up. Have another one over here, and this is a 2018 Toyota Corolla with only 52,000 miles. And with this little bit of damage, I mean just very little, I mean it is just barely bent. I mean the plastic was smashed and the bumper support. You have a little bit of a kink right here, a little bit of a kink up where you see that rise right there, how that metal is up like this. That means it's pushed back and it's folded. This is folded down a little bit, this is folded. So this would be pulled off, straightened out. This is a total out with only 52,000 miles on a 2018 Toyota. This thing is in immaculate condition. It's an interior is immaculate, it's in really good condition, and it's totaled out at below 60%. They submitted their repairs, and this little bit of repairs is already just starting to hit 60% of the value of this car, and the insurance company totaled it out. That's a shame, because this is a great vehicle. But that news came in as I was hooked up to do a recovery, and of course I always ID the refrigerant, and I'm just starting to have my first problems with my ultimate ID. It's getting an oxygen sensor error that stops my unit from working, and I have to use my backup unit, which is old, and my old one was having issues with intermittent use. That made me buy this one, and my one that was older than the old one I have, it stopped working altogether, and it's so old they don't service it. My last model generation that you may have seen in some videos that I use occasionally, when this was a backup for this, it has intermittent problems. This one they just discontinued, and I was told this will no longer be serviceable, and I just bought this like 4 months ago, 4 months ago. And I called them up and told them and showed them a picture of my oxygen sensor error, and they said it's really unusual for a unit that new to have a sensor already, you know, going out on it, burning out. And they just told me, give me an email, take off my ID number, my serial number off the back, and they'll send me out a new oxygen sensor to replace the O2 sensor inside here. Yeah, it is kind of unusual for a unit that's only 4 months old to have a problem, but that's not the unit's fault. What they don't know is how often I use this. In 4 months, on my recoveries, in my list, in my QuickBooks of jobs I've done 468 refrigerant identifications on 468 cars in 4 months. So this little unit has probably gotten as much use that would be in a normal shop for several years. I burn through them real fast. I'm always having to send them, you know, get them replaced. They burn out. They don't last me. Just because I am using them probably a lot more often than they were ever designed to be used. So there's nothing wrong with this. It's just the oxygen sensor going out is just a lot of use. And not only do I use them on cars, when I recycle my refrigerant, before I hook up my recycle tank onto my equipment, I ID the whole entire tank just in case I ever made a mistake. So that was my double check. And then after I do my refrigerant recycling on my what's now a clean refrigerant, I ID it again to make sure there's 0% air in it. And so the oil's been removed, the moistures, any acids, and air has been removed. And prior to taking that tank that has been recycled onto my vehicle, it gets ID'd one more time to make sure there's 0% air in it too. That's it on this one, and I'll get back to that Mustang after I'm finished, and we'll see if it's good. You probably won't see another video because the Mustang should work now because it has an OEM condenser on it.